Hi, welcome to my build of a Piper Cub J3. Today I just wanted to quickly look at the landing gear for the front. Originally I wasn't going to do a video for this, but I thought I would just quickly show what I've been doing. I bought myself a piece of 3mm, I think it's 80mm wide, aluminium, yep, 80mm wide, and I worked out the shape that I needed before I'd bent it, and then clamped it onto the bench with a piece of wood and bent it up into the required shape. So there we go. We've got the very rough shape that I need for the legs. To decide what shape I wanted from the plans, because it didn't really give a lot of details, I actually drew it out on a piece of paper, and also the shape that I was wanting, or the layout for the reinforcing cross wires. Normally these would have elastic bungees, but I'm not doing that. I'm just putting the cross wires. So once I'd got this basic shape, I could set out and make something similar. So, oops. So there you go. I've got that now bent and in shape. I decided that on the plans it shows sheeting the whole bottom of the aircraft and then fixing the landing gear. And I thought, you know what? Why do I need to sheet under the landing gear? If I put the sheeting on like I've done with the front, this still needs finishing, and then the landing gear and then continue the sheeting. The landing gear is going to be set up into the bottom of the aircraft, and so it'll be less visible, and it'll just look a lot better. I've also used these domed head bolts. This isn't actually bolted in at the moment, that just the bolts are pushed in, but I've used these dome head bolts because they just give a lot better profile. The next stage is to put the holes and to trim for the wheel axles, and to trim this up to size. There's no point in having more weight than I needed, and it'll just look a lot more slimmer. These are the wheels I'm using. Okay, they're not typically Cub wheels, but I quite like them. And whereas it is a J3 Cub, it's not a sort of a really rigid scale build. I have had a bit of license to change it as I like. The wire, if I just show you what I've done here. So I had my rough outline of how I wanted the landing gear to be, and then these wire cross braces. So as I said, I bent the landing gear to that shape. I mean, it's still very rough at the moment and needs a lot of finishing. But then I got this stainless steel 2mm wire, which is threaded on either end, and bent that to how I wanted it. I didn't bend it straight off. I got some soft steel, because this stainless steel is quite hard, and just played about with it, twisted it to see how best to do a joint that would suit. And I just came up with something just very simple. It wasn't difficult. So I've drilled a couple of 2mm holes in the bottom of the legs, and these just thread into there and just be held on with nuts and a bit of thread lock, and the nuts will just hide behind the wheels. I'm then going to drill some holes in the top of the aluminium underneath the fuselage, and just thread this through and do a 90-degree. Thread this through and do a 90-degree bend on the top. It's still work in progress. There's still quite a bit to do, but I'm feeling hopeful it's going to look okay. This is quite heavy aluminium, 3mm. It's quite thick. It looks heavy on the aeroplane, but what I'm going to do is actually chamfer the inside edge of this so that it looks, the profile will look a lot thinner and it won't look quite as heavy. That is the plan. So I need to get on with that now, and we'll come back and have a look when it's finished. Okay, well I've finished the undercarriage now, with the exception of giving it some paint. I'll give it Cub Yellow, which will match the fuselage. I've got a really good match of paint. I think because it's quite a common colour, that was easy to find. I've just mocked this up. I've put a wheel on at the moment. It's got these nice rubber wheels. Not typically Cub, I know, but I quite like them, so I've put those on. They're bolted on with 4mm bolts. The head of the bolt is on the outside. It's actually a recessed Allen key bolt, so it just looks a little bit kind of neater. And on the inside here, I've got some nylock nuts, or I might even get some dome nuts to put on and just trim this 4mm bolt to size, so that it looks a lot neater. This stainless steel 2mm wire, which is forming the struts. I've got a 2mm nut here holding it in place. I'll also put a nut on the inside, so that's really secure on both sides. I may actually leave this stainless steel rather than painting it. The aluminium I'll definitely paint, but I quite like the idea of leaving that stainless steel. I know it's not scaled or traditional, but I'll think on with that anyway. The wires, where they come up through the top, I've got my 4 mounting bolts, which will go into hardwood on the bottom of the fuselage, and these strut wires I've brought up through holes here, and I will just bend this over, trim it first, trim it over, and then bend it over flat onto this aluminium, so that will hold it nicely in place. And then when it's fixed up on the underside of here, if you remember, the fixings are recessed from the sheeting. I'll have to just cut a very narrow slot here to accommodate this wire where it's being bent over. But that should be fairly neat and hold in place nicely. This aluminium is 3mm aluminium. I wanted to get something heavy. I mean, I was quite lucky to get aluminium where I'm living, a nice flat piece like this. So I don't know what grade it is, whether it's strong or soft. So I wanted to make it fairly thick. So this is 3mm. But what I've done is I've chamfered this inside edge here on the 2 legs at the front. I haven't done the back, and you can see the back still looks quite thick, but the front, these legs, seem quite thin because they're chamfered, and then they come here thick again. But you won't see that because it's hidden by the sheeting. I just thought that would give it a lighter appearance and just look a little bit better. The reason I haven't done in the back is because as that is on the plane, it's going to be the front you'll see. You'll never see the back except when it's lifted up and heading off at speed down the runway. So I thought I would leave that. I've actually fitted the fuselage now, and I'm quite pleased with how that looks, and I've still got a little bit to do to it. I'll paint it Cub Yellow, which matches the covering that I've got for it, and I also need to trim the bolts for the wheels, or the axles, so they're a little bit shorter, and I'll probably either use some nylock nuts or maybe some domed headed nuts with a little bit of thread lock. That'll just look a lot nicer. If I turn it over, you can see how the undercarriage looks a lot less visible by missing out the sheeting underneath it and just bringing this sheeting up to meet it. The sheeting's 3mm and the aluminium's 3mm, so it's nice and flush. And I've still got the sheeting to put on the back, which I'll do once I finish the control linkages. But these wires are all nice and secure now, bolted in and everything.